I'm back in my workshop with one of these Chinese diesel heaters. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, you installed a hydronic heating system. Why do you need a diesel heater? Remember this contraption? So the way this works, or supposed to work, is coolant gets pumped through the hydronic furnace that is underneath the van. It pumps hot coolant through this heat exchanger and comes out into another heat exchanger, and a fan blows hot air out of these ports, and then it runs back through and goes back into the coolant tank, and it's supposed to be hot. So the issue was this fan heater just wasn't making the air hot enough. It wasn't putting enough heat out. So I broke down and got me one of the diesel heaters. So let's set up a little contraption, make sure it works properly, and then let's install it. All right, so this beautiful contraption, I made a little stand for the heater so the exhaust pipe and intake can be positioned underneath it. I mounted the diesel tank above it, drilled a little hole, went through it into the fuel pump, mounted at a 15-degree angle, and I hooked up my battery. And I wanted to do all that before I put diesel in there, just to make sure it turned on. It's all pretty much a straightforward setup. I didn't even read the instructions to install any of it. I mean, after installing the hydronic heater, this was a piece of cake. And all these instructions were in English. So if I had any issues, I mean, all the plugs only go one way, positive, negative. Fuel pump into the diesel heater. The only thing that wasn't mentioned was this little port, I guess, for diesel flow. And I just drilled a little hole, and it came with this little fuel line adapter in an O-ring. And how I got that there, because I didn't just drop it in there and it fall perfectly into the hole, I tied like a little fishing wire around this and dropped the wire. Well, I dropped the wire through the bottom, came out the top, tied this to the wire, and then pulled it out so it just came right out the hole. And that was pretty easy. Now I got the fuel line going in the fuel pump going into the heater, heater's intake, heater's exhaust, and positive and negative. And then off that wire loom comes a little remote. I got to figure this out. There's a different settings and different information, and all the little emblems light up when they're being used. So if I turn it on, you'll see it says on, then see the little fan spinning, and now you can hear the fan spinning, showing the batteries connected, showing the intake and exhaust. I guess that's what that little symbol means. Oh no, down there. So you see it. Intake, outtake, intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust. Shows that there's power connected to it. And in a second, you'll hear the fuel line kick on, and that's pumping fuel into the diesel heater. There we go. Fuel pump. You can hear it now clicking, and it just showed up on here as it's working. And you can watch the diesel work its way up into the... Oh, it's already there. What was that? Uh-oh. Diesel line touched the exhaust. Burned it a little bit. Gotta get that away from that. But now the heater kicked on, blowing a little bit of air out. And it'll gradually ramp up, and then it'll level out, and it won't be as loud. And as you can hear, the pump gets faster, heater gets louder, the hotter the air comes out. Now you can kind of hear it. After that, the excitement of the startup is now just blowing straight hot air. It's perfect. Now let's get this in the van. So the idea, get this thing out of here, cut this coolant line, reconnect it to this exchanger, and it's just going to go right in with a 90-degree connector. And I'm going to eliminate these lines, eliminate this, but there's coolant in the lines, so I'm going to need to drain it. But the idea is for the heater to go right here. My electronics are going to go here, so I'm thinking the heater should be facing that way, blowing the hot air away from the electronics, but the intake needs to have air around it, and if there's going to be a wall here, it's not going to work. So if there's a wall there, I can put the heater a little bit further this way, create some type of vent on this wall, and just use a 90-degree air blower right out the front here. And hopefully it'll stay away from the electronics so it won't heat any of that up. But I like the idea of keeping everything here for the sake of central heating. It'll go that way, it'll be evenly distributed. I know a lot of people put them in the passenger side little cavity underneath that, but I pretty much want to keep everything consolidated right here. So I got that old hunk of junk out of here. And it was almost like I knew this thing was going to go in here the whole time. The floor was cut perfectly. There was a perfect space with no insulation. Perfect. So what I did was I put the heater, or I attached the plate to the heater, and now that there's a space under here, I have the this plate sitting on these aluminum struts, and it's keeping it off the actual van floor. So instead of cutting a 5-inch hole like I initially was going to do, I'm just going to cut the holes for the vent, the intake, or the exhaust, the intake, and the fuel line. So that way I don't have to worry about a big old hole under here, and there's not going to be any way to seal it with this gap. And with my floor being as thick as it is with the insulation, this and the actual floor, there was no way to get it to be mounted to the actual van floor without cutting cutting all this out of here. So I think this is going to be fine. Once that intake hole and that exhaust hole are cut and the pipes are running through it, I can just seal around the holes, and that'll be airtight. All right, it took me a while, but I rearranged this little cavity where my hydronic heater was, and everything was kind of in this little cavity. But because of where the heater is, now there's basically two things interfering with each other. So I had to move this muffler over here, and I'm dangling with a little L bracket going straight out. And I got the old intake for this hydronic heater up in this little space up in there, and the new intake is now up in this cavity above the leaf spring. I don't know if you can tell where that is up in there, but now fuel lines tight to the body. It's not going to be dripping and being loose anywhere, and it's got a good space between this and the exhaust, so nothing's going to touch. All my wires are connected up here and zip tied together. Just nice and clean. Here's a wider view of everything, and gives you a good idea of how I connected everything. Alrighty, here's what I got. Don't mind the napkins, that's for drippy coolant. Anyway, so I got my heater mounted to the ground, wires coming up through the floor, everything hooked up underneath it, and I mounted my diesel tank to that existing plywood, and I just brought it straight off, screwed it into the side, and mounted my diesel tank right above it. I got it floating off the ground, so it's all these wires and lines can run freely, and I can get in there and work on it if I need to. And like I said, the first time I got my intake facing this way and my heater going this way, because not only did I mount the plate in this configuration, I also figured out that when I have this space open, there's going to be plenty of air in there, and when I see people put them in those things, it's not going to be any more cramped than putting it in the chair cavity. So I might run some piping over here and bring it out of the bottom of the bench that I'm going to have right here, and I'll have little outlets of heater, so it'll be dispersing throughout this entire front area. And so here it is, all set up, ready for the first test run of my heater install. Put a little bit of diesel, just turned it on, waiting for it to ramp up. Pump just kicked on. Starting to pump some diesel. See it moving real slow. So it was, I turned it on, and just like any good van install, an error code came up, and did a quick little look under the van, and the line was not priming properly, so it just wasn't getting the diesel flow. So what I did when I first set it up on my little contraption, I didn't put the little diesel filter in there, but I did put the diesel filter under the van before the actual diesel pump. And when I looked under there, there was a big air bubble inside the filter. So apparently there was air getting into it, and it just wasn't getting good enough suction to pull the diesel through the line. So I just cut it out and just connected the diesel just like I did on my first contraption, and now it's working fine. I like it a lot. And then when I cut the diesel line, air finally got to it, and it started flowing through, so diesel poured out all over me. And I stink like diesel. So it's hard to tell if this setup will make the entire van smell like diesel. I hope not, but we will see. But that's how you That's how you install a diesel heater. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later. And I know people are going to be curious about whether or not it smells like diesel. So it sat overnight. And I don't smell any diesel. It smells clean in here. It smells like wood floor. So if that alleviates people's curiosity, I don't see any problem with it smelling like diesel in there.